listening to Bleeding Page Podcast. Join authors Chad Lutzke and Jason Brandt as they delve into writing and publishing the dark side of fiction.
Chad, it's been
Jason.
a couple weeks.
Dude, it has. And it's partly my fault, mainly yours, probably, because I get the guests and you don't do any.
It's true.
I guess it's both of our faults.
I'm not going to deny it. I don't reach out to anybody. But we had a good one this week. I just had a lot of fun with this conversation.
It was, I've known Jay for a while. It was great hanging out with him again. It's been a little bit. Can't remember the last time I talked to him face to face, but it was a lot of fun, man. Jay's a good dude, good writer. I would encourage you to, we talk a lot about his podcast, his 18th podcast or whatever, Writers Inc. that he does with Zach Bohannon, which we've had on here, and JD Barker, which hopefully we will have on here one day. Talk a lot about that. I would encourage you to go listen to that. Very, very cool podcast. Jay's got a lot of nonfiction writing that he's been doing the last couple of years, and he's continuing to do. He's, as you called it, like a trailblazer, I guess.
Yeah, this one wasn't about writing and selling fiction so much as just an entrepreneurial mindset, I think is how I put it. He definitely is all over the map. He's got 1 million projects going, and I could relate to that because I haven't written nearly as much lately either. I've been doing other stuff, so I could relate. And it was just interesting kind of picking his brain about how he decides to do things, how he gets things going. It's just, he's kind of all over the place, and I dug it. This was a really great conversation.
Yeah.
And he and I have been in the same orbit when we were writing a lot, but I had never actually interacted with him. But I saw him, on Twitter and Facebook and stuff all the time. So it was good talking to him.
Yeah, it was cool. It's a lot of people don't understand that any, Amazon can make some kind of change, assuming, like let's say you're just strictly self-publishing and you're exclusive with Amazon, that they could make some kind of change. And or even we talked, and then things are way different. Your monthly income is way different. And we even touched a little bit on having the rug pulled out from under you with no explanation given, that Amazon tends to do once in a while. And if you're relying for your monthly income to, feed yourself and your family, and they do that, then you're screwed. And so not just about going wide, but about just taking your skills and dipping your feet anywhere you can.
Yeah, which I think is good advice. I mean, if you're killing it, with your writing, totally makes sense to go all in. But
sure,
having different income streams is not a bad idea.
Yeah. So Jay is an author of several post-apocalyptic and dark fantasy series, as well as a handful of nonfiction books. Like I was talking about, like the 3-story method would be one of them. He's got like some workbooks and I think 3 books in that little, nonfiction series. If you haven't read him before, you've probably listened to one of the many podcasts that he's had over the years, which cover everything from writing horror to music to entrepreneurship and even being an introvert. He co-hosts his most recent podcast, Writers Inc., with JD Barker and Zach Bohannon, where he's had the opportunity to interview people like Dean Koontz. I think they did Chuck Palahniuk, Nicholas Sparks, James Patterson, and even Matthew McConaughey. So check that out.
Matthew McConaughey on?
Yeah. Yeah. Go check that podcast out. Check out what Jay has to offer on Amazon. And but now, listen to us talk to him.
Get a lot written today?
Yes.
Jay, I've known you for 2014, 2015, I think.
It's been years now, man.
Yeah.
It seems like yesterday, but it's been a while.
I was trying to think of how we even met, and I can't remember. And if I had to guess, I maybe reached out to you when you were doing the Horror Writers podcast.
That would be my guess, and I started that in 2014, so that would have been about right.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think it was when you were doing it with the we were just trying to, I don't remember the guy's name, the guy that used to wear the sunglasses. I can't remember his name.
Richard Brown.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, after that, you were doing, you did it with Zach, and then I remember you doing the Dark Arts Theater. And the reason why I bring that up is because, it's cool. Like with social media, when you get to know somebody on here, you watch them. I mean, I can't count how many times I've seen somebody find a girlfriend, get married, have a kid, see the kid grow up, and now they're like 7 or whatever. It's very bizarre. And then you've never met them, but you get this strange satisfaction at watching someone, grow or excel in whatever it is that they're doing, or have, having life-changing events, for positive ones. And Dark Arts Theater, you were doing in that. And I remember years ago at the time, you were freaking out because you got permission from Clive Barker to use something he'd written. And it seemed like such a milestone at the time, but compared to what you've been doing since then, especially in the last, 2-3 years, it barely ranks anymore. And I just, so congratulations.
Well, thanks, man. I don't know. It's still a milestone for me. I still listen to that every now and then. But yeah, I think if you stick around long enough, you end up taking some lucky shots here and there.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think, now I hear your voice and on podcasts as you're talking to Dean Koontz and Nicholas Sparks and your buddies with JD Barker. And it's like, that's what I mean. It's like, yeah, you got some, written permission to use this thing, but now you're hanging out with these guys. I mean, who gets a Dean Koontz interview anymore?
Yeah. I mean, I got to give props to JD. He's the guy with the connections, man. He's got people in his phone that I just kind of scratch my head. I'm like, you're texting who? Like, yeah. And I know, like, for some of the interviews, he worked on Koontz for years, and he's very delicate with it. He's not heavy handed,
sure,
but he just picks away at people, and eventually they give in and say yes.
Which is ironic considering early in his career, he was heading to Stephen King's house to pitch him a manuscript. So that's about as heavy-handed as you can get, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, JD, whether it's his personality or his Asperger's, he's just very direct on everything. Like, it's just he doesn't mince words, he doesn't waste words. He just says what he means, and that's that.
Yeah. I'm pardon me. I'm actually kind of fascinated by him because I've never I didn't know of him even before the podcast. I think we're friends on Facebook. He was following me on Twitter, and so I think he just follows as many writers as he probably can. For you never know who you're gonna want to network with. But then I started hearing him talk about some of his history and stuff, and I think it was. And I thought, man, this guy is like fascinating. I would love to be friends with this guy. You guys are, I'm so jealous. Just seems like a really cool guy. Got a lot of cool stories to tell. And then I heard him on, I think it was Zach's podcast. And he said some stuff on there. I was like, whoa, dude, I could talk to this guy for hours. He was talking about hanging out with, getting advice from Madonna and all this, and driving these people around and all this crazy stuff. And then like selling all his stuff. And it's like, and then the whole, Bram Stoker stuff. Yeah, he's got some crazy stuff to talk about.
Dude, he does. Do you know the 21 Jump Street story?
I don't think so.
Jason's shaking his head. All right, this is the best. Anytime Zach and JD and I are together, we'll start saying something, and JD will be like, "Oh, I did that one time," and Zach and I will look at each other. And we're like, "Of course he did," and like. If you were in a bar having beers with people, you'd be like, this guy's full of shit. Like, there's no way, right? So I forget what we were talking about, Johnny Depp or something. And JD's like, oh, yeah, I was on 21 Jump Street. We're like, okay, hold up, time out. And he goes and he tells the story like he was, he was 19 or 20 and they were filming in the movie in Florida or something. And he ended up being an extra, and he had like a non-speaking part. He was on screen for like 3 seconds. And we're like, come on, JD. And then like a week later, he digs out this, photograph or the still of him, in the movie. So he's got like, he comes out with these stories and now we're just like, well, yeah, of course. Like, of course he did, like he took Madonna back and forth to the airport for a few weeks on tour. Yeah, of course he did,
How did he end up in the movie?
He was living in Florida. I don't know if he was working in a theme park, but he was kind of hanging out with, like people who were in the industry. Like, here's another thing. I don't know if you guys know this. He started a fanzine with Brian Warner. Does that name ring a bell?
No.
Brian Warner.
Also known as Marilyn Manson.
Oh yeah.
Jesus.
Whoa, what?
Yeah. They like early in the late 80s, early 90s, they had some like underground music fanzine and he was writing articles with Marilyn Manson. So it's like you get like, yeah, these stories come up and you're like, whoa. And JD's he says this all the time. He's like, yeah, I've had a strange life, man. He's like, I don't know how I end up in these situations. He's like, I've had weird things happen to me.
That's wild.
Wow. Yeah. And now he's writing with Patterson and Stoker and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff.
But anyway, this isn't about him. Sorry.
Yeah. The first 10 minutes.
About weird segue. Yeah. But okay, so I've known you long enough to see you go from speaking of like watching someone excel, from having a handful of books out to being able to quit your job and make writing your full-time career. The first few years that you were doing that, you were really prolific and you were putting several books out a year, many of them co-written with Zach Bohannon. But you slowed down quite a bit since then, but only with, really self-publishing dark fiction. I know you've been putting out nonfiction stuff, like your 3-story method. And was that decision from getting burned out, or is just that because I know you like to constantly, not stop it, like, okay, this is my thing, I'm going to self-publish. I was looking at other avenues to either spread the word about this or to, anything that kind of like touches that. So again, was it just you getting burned out, or is that just part of you, looking at a bigger picture and kind of constantly evolving?
Yeah, man, that's it's an interesting question. And I'm trying to think about how to answer it. I have definitely written less fiction over the past couple of years than I did in, say, the early 2010s. Mm-hmm. And part of it was I went in a different direction than you did. And I think I've come full circle to where you are now, which is kind of interesting. So I started in 2010, 2011, 2012. I was very much in the formulaic approach to genre fiction on Amazon, right? So it's like you identify the sub niche and then you write to that audience, and you write one series and you put like 50 books in that series and you pump those things out like once or twice a month. And I never got to that level of proficiency. I think that's very few people do. It's a very unrealistic expectation. Mm-hmm. But I think after a few years, and a lot of those books I did with Zach, part of me just didn't find it as interesting anymore. Like I felt like I was like writing myself into a corner. And you and I had conversations, and I was like, dude, if you want to sell commercial, you're going to have to pick a genre and you're going to have to write one particular kind of story. And like, I don't regret what I did, but like now I totally get where you're at. I understand completely why you did that. And I think that's why you have continued to be steady and consistent writing the kind of stories you want to write. Whereas I kind of burnt out on the kind of stories I was telling. So I'm kind of in a strange place right now, in that I'm not really sure what my future in fiction is going to look like. As you mentioned, I've continued to write a lot of nonfiction, and I really enjoy that. But I don't think I want to go back into that sort of algorithmic rat race where I'm constantly like feeding Amazon,
Right. Sorry.
Was that Running with the Devil I just
I was
heard?
going to say, you got Paul Stanley in the studio there, or what was
Yeah,
it?
that's David Lee Roth. Yeah, that's been my notification thing for years, and I love it.
I recognize that scream anywhere.
Yeah, it was Running with the Devil. Yeah. Sorry.
Anyway, so you're not sure where your fiction career is headed.
Yeah, I'm right now. I'm kind of hit pause on it. I have a back catalog. It sells meagerly. It's not. I'm a full-time writer, but I don't make my full-time living off royalties. And again, there are two people in my entire life, and one of them is J.D. Barker, who I know who makes a living on royalties from fiction only. Yeah. Everybody else has some sort of author services, a side hustle, a day job, whatever you want to call it. So that I'm going to bust that myth wide open. But yeah, I don't know, man. I just don't. Right now, over the past year or two, I've really been getting back into music, and I feel like I read a Derek Sivers book. I love Derek Sivers. He's a guy who founded CD Baby. If you guys know him, he wrote a book called Hell Yes or No, and in the book he talks about if you can, divorcing your art from your commerce. That it's really hard to make art if you are trying to pay the bills with it, and it took me a long time to really internalize that. And I think that's kind of where I'm coming to now.
Okay. Yeah. And that makes sense what you said about why you got burned out. And because, that was, I got burned out just thinking about it. And I remember a couple times I wanted to do a series, and I put a first book out in the series. One, I loved it, and I'm still continuing, but I think I'm going to work at the rest of them with a publisher. Another one was just a vampire thing. I was like, I'll do my thing on it, my spin, but it'll be like this niche. And I'll probably get. But dude, by the time I was done with that book, I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to write another in this series.
Right.
And it's just not, more power to people who can stick to that genre. I think that's why it's important to, stick to a genre that's making them money, but more importantly, that they start it with something that they just are super passionate about, and they just can't, they don't want to write in anything else. And this is just I get that, and I respect that. I'm glad that you have, at the very least, a back catalog that you can, I don't know how much you bring in a month. You said it was, kind of meager at this point, and I would assume so, because there seems to be some kind of, and that was kind of one of my next questions was, without you putting, so many books out a year, there's got to be some difference in your, in your royalties per month with through KDP. But I was just wondering if it was like lower than you expected, higher than you expected, because I know that just something about, putting a book out every 2 or 3 months gets people, where you're like, don't forget about me. I got another one. And whether it's in a same series or not, even with me, if I write this humorous crime noir thing and then I turn around and write this kind of splatterpunk thing, it's still got my name on it. So, where if I didn't put that second book out, my sales would, start to slowly go down until they're just kind of plateau at a certain level that I expect every month.
Yeah. At this point, I might sell a handful of fiction novels a month. It's really not many. Most of my royalties are coming from my nonfiction books. And that's kind of a whole nother discussion, right? Because, nonfiction, you can typically price higher. Nonfiction is easier to market and to sell in many cases. And I wrote most of my nonfiction after doing years of client work and coaching. So I knew exactly what problems people were having. I could then just turn around and write a book addressing those. So as far as writing process goes, for me, the nonfiction was a no-brainer. And it was like, yeah, okay, well, I love to write and I love to write fiction, but like if I'm not feeling it right now or I'm unsure where I want to go, I can still write nonfiction, still put it out under my name. I don't think the nonfiction helps my fiction sales at all, but it certainly helps my bottom line.
Okay.
You seem to have pivot a lot in your career. How do you decide when to abandon something and try something else, or just kind of shift your angle?
I guess I could credit my ADHD for that. I don't know. I feel like I have undiagnosed ADHD. My brother and I both were like, yeah, if we were, kids in the thousands instead of the 70s, we would have been on medication for sure. But in all seriousness, part of it is like I'm not very patient, and that's not necessarily always a good thing. But like if I don't see a glimmer of hope, if I don't see some sort of promising return on my investment, it's hard for me to keep it up. I'm good friends with Joanna Penn, and we have conversations all the time. And she'll joke around and be like, if you had just stuck with the Horror Writers podcast, you would have been, you would have been producing 8 years by now. I'm like, yeah, but like I couldn't have done that. Like it wouldn't have been possible for me. Like I said what I wanted to say. I wasn't interested in those particular topics anymore. So I don't have a really good way of indicating or understanding when I need to pivot, but I like to follow new and emerging trends. I like to be out front. I'm more of an early adopter, especially when it comes to technology. I'm not a great follower, so I'd almost rather experiment and make mistakes than just try and like follow the worn path, which just isn't as exciting to me.
Does that make it easier or more difficult to make a living?
Way more difficult. Like if I could have just identified a genre in 2009 or even in 2019, and if I had just like consistently wrote in that genre, not even in the series, in the genre, like like props to Zach. Like you guys had Zach on, like, I forget when Empty Bodies came out. Was it 2015, maybe 2016, something like that? There. I mean, he's been consistently writing zombie fiction, and now he's got a really nice, steady monthly income on that back catalog. And I wish I could have done that. Like, I don't regret it because I don't think I could have, but he did, and he's making it work for him. And I don't know. I struggle to do that. So
part of the pivot is boredom. Part of it's wanting to be a trailblazer.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't even know if it's maybe more disinterest than boredom. Like I still love like writing post-apocalyptic fiction, but I'm just not as interested in it now as I was, 5 or 10 years ago.
Sounds like you got out what you needed to get out, and sometimes you don't know how long that well lasts. I remember when I put A Foster Homes and Flies out, I was like, cool, got my coming of age book out, and then I write like 10 more. I don't know, and that's not because, people love coming of age. It was just like, man, I guess I have more of this kind of thing in me than I thought. So yeah, but if it's something else, I can see like what you were saying about the Horror Writers podcast. You said what you had to say, and then, the well ran dry and it's time to move on.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time, like, I'm a terrible example. Don't listen to anything I say. Don't take advice from me because I do all the wrong stuff. Like, I think through sheer grit and determination, I just keep moving forward. But like, I don't do what you're supposed to do. And I think you're right, Chad. Like, I saw this in music a lot before I started writing. Like, one of the bands I was in was like, it was the band I would have been in if I could have like handpicked and designed it. That band, like, the name and the logo and the sound and the people in it, it was like perfect. And after a few years, I felt like a jerk, but like I had to go to the guys and be like, I'm done. And they're like, why? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just done. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't make any sense. Like, on paper, it doesn't make any sense. And I'm not saying we were making a ton of money or that would have been a reason, but like, everything lined up the way I wanted it to. And then I experienced it. And then at a certain point, I was like, all right, this is kind of over for me.
Yeah. Does that worry you now whenever you get like passionate about something new? Do you ever question yourself and go, great, Jay, how long is this gonna,
I think through years of therapy and making these mistakes, I think what I've learned to recognize is that instead of like wondering when I'm going to lose interest, I just go into everything knowing like I'm not going to do this forever.
Yeah.
Like, and I think a lot of people have the opposite approach. Like, I think whether it's relationships or art or anything, people go in assuming nothing will ever change. This will always be the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just go into things going like, I know this will end at some point and somehow, so I'm just going to enjoy every moment that I'm in it until it does end.
Yeah.
Where's your passion right now?
My passion right now is helping other writers, and it's music. I've really come back a lot to music over in the past couple of years. I know Chad and I have had many conversations about music, and I know Chad's working on some stuff too. But even like I started reading Pet Sematary was the first book that I read that I wasn't forced to read, and I that was probably around 12, 13 maybe. I was about 12, 13, maybe 14. I can't quite remember. And that's where sort of my love of reading began. My love of music started when I was like 5 or 6. Like, I think for me, the music has always been my first passion, and I really grew to love reading and writing. And I think I'm kind of coming back to that first passion. It doesn't mean I don't like writing anymore. I won't, but I'm really feeling an urge now to write, create, produce, record new music. And I don't really care what happens. Like, I don't care if no one listens to it. Like, the process for me is very fulfilling right now. And I think that's kind of where I am in this moment.
So you don't know that you'll make money from it, but it's something you're interested in.
Yeah, I'm not adverse to it, but I don't care if I do.
Sure. How does your family handle this?
Jason's like, oh, wait, how are you still married? That's the question you're
you'd
asking,
think
right?
that he's on his 8th wife now.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I'm so opposite of you. When I get on a track, I just grind on that. And that to a fault sometimes. Sometimes I should let projects go.
Yeah.
And I just keep going with it. So I'm like so opposite, on track for a year now, and I'm like, I have just everything else blotted out. Yeah,
strangely enough for me, and this is one of those weird things that where you have to like hold two conflicting ideas in your head at the same time, and it makes it hurt. But I burn out on stuff, or I get tired, I get disinterested in things, but it never happens with people or relationships. I'm fiercely loyal. Like I have friends for, like, I don't have many friends, but the friends I have are friends I've had for a long time, or they're friends who I could call up and be like, hey, I got to hide a body. And they're like, where and when do I need to meet you? Like that's, and so it's a bizarre thing. Like, I don't know why. I don't know why it's different with people, but friends, loved ones, spouse, for me, that's just completely different.
I'm not that kind of friend, Jay, so don't call me.
Good to know.
I was just going to say, he must be patient and forgiving if he's been dealing with you since 2014 or whatever.
But Chad could call me about hiding a body and I'd help him out.
Really noted. All right.
I was going to ask also, are we live from your bathroom? Because I see about a half a fish, maybe a sun.
I'm in a co-working space. I recently, we sold our house last year at the height of the boom, and
nice,
and moved into an apartment because my eldest went to college and my youngest is only 2 more years of high school, and my wife and I were going to become digital nomads when she leaves. So we ended up moving into an apartment, and the apartment is less than ideal for creativity and for podcasting. So I luckily have a great co-working space nearby, and so I often do a lot of my work here.
You're renting out about half a shower stall from the back.
There are grizzlies on that wall and wolves howling at moons. You can't see the whole thing.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned renting an office space to work out of. It's something I've thought of a lot, just because the distractions from home can be difficult. Are you liking it?
Yeah, I love it. I wish I would have done it sooner. So I went full time in 2017, and up until January of this year, I worked from home, and I kind of went through the cycles. I went through the phases of the work from home. Like at first, you don't get dressed, you don't brush your teeth, you just kind of roll out of bed and you're like, I'm at work. And then
Wait, that's a cycle. I've been doing this for over 10 years now. I'm still doing the same thing.
Well, for me, I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm tired of looking at these same walls. And then More recently, my wife got a remote work position, and the apartment's kind of small. So I would be, at my desk, like writing something, and she would walk up and be like, "Did you defrost the chicken?" And I'm like, "All right, listen, when I'm at this desk, like, you can't interrupt me like that. Like,
You're in the zone.
Yeah. And like people who don't do creative work don't get that. They're like, well, I just asked you a question. I'm like, no, you just pulled me out and it's going to be like 30 minutes before I get back in.
Yeah.
So part of it was like relationship management. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to move myself out to a co-working space. It's like $100 a month, which is it's not like a ton, but it's enough to make me like use it,
Yeah.
And it's great. Like there are different breakout rooms. I occasionally get to see other people who aren't in my own family, which is good for me as a hardcore introvert. It's good for me to occasionally talk to other humans in real life. And they've got free coffee. So it's like, it's a win all the way around.
$100 a month. I could deal with that.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really convenient for me. It's literally across the parking lot. Like I walk out of my apartment complex across the street, and I'm here. So I don't even have to get in a car, which is another bonus.
Oh, that's interesting.
The way I deal with it is the doorknob on my office is broken, and I haven't fixed it. And I think one of the reasons why I've been so lazy and haven't fixed it because I'm the only one who can open it from the other side because their fingers aren't strong enough. So they can't get in here. Like my wife, she's like, my son can do it sometimes. And he'll knock and be like, Dad. And I'll say, come on in. And I can hear him trying to, because you got to grab the thing metal thing and try to grip it and turn it. And he's like, and I'll hear him struggling and I mess with him all the time. I was like, come in. And because I know he can't get it. And then I'll say, yeah, come in, buddy. Come on in. And he'll give up. He'll get frustrated and start laughing. But it keeps them out. So all I got to do is shut that door. And it's like I got a lock on there. I should replace it, but it's probably a fire hazard somehow.
Sounds like it's working.
Yeah. I wouldn't mess with it.
So when you decide to start a new project, do you research it a ton? Do you prepare, or do you just kind of dive in and I'm starting my 37th podcast or whatever?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what type of project it is.
Okay.
Or like, is there a certain example you might have?
Chad was talking about before you joined Authors on a Train.
Oh yeah.
How the hell do you even decide to do that, and then how do you figure out how to do that?
Yeah. That's one of those great examples of me wanting to do things that other people aren't doing or be on the leading edge.
Freaking killer idea, dude.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, and we're hoping to bring it back. The pandemic kind of killed it, and we're not quite ready to bring it back yet, but hopefully we will. But the original idea came because I was doing a lot of train travel. I have inner ear issues, and sometimes I fly, but I try not to, just because the air pressure change really, I get some severe pain. Like, like if you can't pop your ears, that feeling.
Yeah. I just got that for the first time in April, and it was brutal.
Oh, it's awful. Yeah.
But like my eye was going to pop out of my
head. It's like your head's full of air or something. Yeah. I don't know.
It only lasts for the 45 minutes you're descending.
Yeah. Well, and for me, once I would land, it would take like overnight for the air pressure to dissipate, and I'd just be in agony. So anyways, I had to do a few West Coast events for the job I was working at the time. So I ended up taking Amtrak from Cleveland to California, which was amazing. Like, it was an amazing trip, although that train just derailed this week, so maybe not so right now, but it was awesome. And I was on Twitter, and I was I don't know why I was tweeting something about it, and Lindsay Broker replied and was like, "Oh, that sounds cool. I've never been on a train." And I don't know why. I was just like, "Well, let's get on a train together and we'll write something." And she was like, "Okay." And I'm like, "Well, let's ask a couple other people." So I asked Zach and I asked Joanna Penn, and they were both like, "Yeah, okay." So just like that, just like an off the cuff kind of thing. I was like, "All right." So we met in Chicago, all four of us. We took the train to New Orleans. We plotted out a novella on the way down. We wrote it while we were there. We revised it when we came home. Anyways, long story short, the last night, Zach and I are sitting there, and I think we're having a beer in the French Quarter or something. And I'm like, dude, you know what'd be awesome? He's like, what? I said, if we hosted this for other writers. And I could see like his face just lit up, like, and even from like underneath the beard, I could see his face lighten up. and I was like, all right, we're onto something here. He's like, yeah, that's kind of cool. So we just like started putting the word out. We're like, hey, if we hosted, 8 to 10 authors, we're going to go to Chicago to New Orleans. You ride the train, blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of how it started. And it was Joanna who was like, oh, yeah, you guys should totally do that. You should call it Authors on a Train. And that's how it began.
So definitely not planning.
No.
Going for it.
No, and like I think I do that a lot. I commit to something and then I'll figure out how to do it. And like I've been doing that my whole life. And I know that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But I will I'll say yes to stuff that I don't know how to do, and then I'll go figure it out. And most of the time I do. Like, there was I was doing multi-author box sets in like 2012, and I had this idea. Like, I wanted to get Joe Conrath in on a box set. I thought, oh man, it'd be so cool to get Joe Conrath in on this. So I went to Joe, and I went to Glenn James and T.W. Piperbrook and J.R. Rain. I went to Scott Nicholson. Like, I went to a lot of these like old school horror guys. And I was like, hey, I want to put this box set together. You guys give me one novel. I'll put it all together. We'll sell it, and then we'll split the royalties. Now, like 2012, this was kind of revolutionary. Like, people weren't doing that in 2012. And I was like, I'm going to see what they say. And like all of them said yes. And I was like, oh, shit. Now I got to figure out how to do this. Like, I got like, Conrath and Nicholson and G.R. Rain, and these guys like are like, all right, let's go. And I'm like, all right, I got to figure this out. So I kind of operate that way. I mean, occasionally I get burned where I can't figure it out or it takes me longer, but most of the time I usually come up with something.
And you called yourself an introvert? This feels very extroverted.
Well, this is the mistake. It's not. This is the misconception people have of introverts. So it's not. We're not shy or afraid to talk to people. It's just when we do, we need to recharge. So like I'm talking to you guys, and then I have a session after you guys that's an hour, and then I'm going to go home, and I won't get out of bed for 10 hours.
Sure. No,
right?
My wife's the same way.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm not at all afraid of talking to people or asking people for stuff or approaching people. I mean, that's how I met JD Barker. I just walked right up to him at Thriller Fest, and I was like, hey man, nice to meet you. Love your stuff. Let's meet up. Let's talk. And he's like, okay. And that's how everything started with JD. Is I just approached him at Thriller Fest and introduced myself.
Wow. I mean, that does work. If you're I do tell people, like, if you just go up and say hi, that goes a long way. But a lot of people just won't even do that.
It does. And honestly, I like when I met JD, I kind of had an idea. I'm like, this would be a cool dude to podcast with. I mean, I think Chad got that sense and he mentioned it earlier. Mm-hmm. But so we got together at the cocktail party, and there were a lot of people surrounding him, and I had to wait in line to get to him. And I finally did, and we were talking, and he was like, yeah, I want to improve my public speaking when I go on book tours or I do paid talks. And I'm like, yeah, podcasting's great for that. You just show up, I'll do all the work. And he was like, yeah, okay, all right. And I'm like, so you want to do it? And he was like, no. And I was like, he's like, I don't have the time. I'm like, all right. So I went home and like I followed up with an email. Like, hey, it was nice to meet you. Just wondering, you thought any more about the podcast? He's like, not really. I'm like, okay. A couple weeks later, I think I sent him another email. I'm like, hey, just wondering if you're still thinking about that podcast at all. And then he was like, maybe. And that was all I needed. I just needed that little bit of maybe in there. And, I eventually got him to do the podcast. And here we are, 3 years later.
That's great. I enjoyed the podcast. You guys have a lot of authors that I'm not familiar with. I like the interviews are great, but I really like the camaraderie at the beginning. I look forward to that. And when it's like, okay, it's time for the interview, I was like, no, keep talking.
It's so funny you mention that, Chad, because in the feedback we get from the podcast, I hear two things repeatedly. I hear, oh my God, I love the interviews. your interviews are amazing. And then I hear, I don't listen to the interviews. I just listen to you guys.
Yeah.
In the beginning. And I'm like,
to be honest, if I'm not familiar with somebody, I will oftentimes listen to the beginning of the interview, because you usually started out with something almost like some kind of inside joke. And then and like you guys have been talking for years or something, which I think is really cool and I appreciate. But there have been times where I'm like, okay, I'm done with, listening to this for now, because I got to hear the beginning of it.
Yeah, that's my ridiculous opener. I try and
break the ice.
Yeah, break the ice, set the tone, right?
Yeah.
How many podcasts have you had?
I don't know the exact count off the top of my head. I'm gonna say between 12 and 15, possibly. I know at some point at the end of last year, I had recorded my 1,000th episode total across all the shows. I don't know the exact number, but I was like ballparking it based on the number of episodes I'd written. And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm over 1,000 at this point.
Well, I'm glad you were never prescribed Adderall so that we can get all those podcasts.
Yeah, it makes for entertaining listening, I think.
When did you get to a point where you could actually make money from a podcast, or have you? It feels like one of those things that you hear about, but you don't actually know anybody who really does it.
Yeah, we make a nickel or two here or there. Like we cover some of the costs. We have Kobo's been a great sponsor of ours for a number of years. We've recently brought in Dave Chessum's Atticus. He's a Kindlepreneur guy, so they're a sponsor. Most of the revenue that comes from the podcast is indirect, and it's hard to measure. I'll give you an example. Almost every client I've worked with, almost every person I've coached, they first found me on a podcast. So I can't track that necessarily. Like that doesn't show up, in a spreadsheet. But even in my community, I run an author community of a few hundred people, and almost every single person in there, if you ask them, how did you meet or find out about Jay Thorn? It was a podcast. So, the takeaway from that is don't expect to get paid to podcast, but also if you're serving an audience and if you do it consistently and you show up, you will get some residual benefit from it.
So be a podcast whore.
Yeah, that too.
Do you struggle if you've recorded 1,000 episodes? Jesus, do you struggle with turning down interviews?
I don't get many. Yeah, I don't get many. I don't know. I shouldn't say I don't get many. I don't know how many is. Right. I get asked to come on a podcast maybe once a month, twice a month. So I don't know if that's a lot. Like I almost always say yes. Just because I know what it feels like trying to get guests on your podcast. So I'll almost always say yes, but I don't know if that's a lot or not.
Okay. I was just curious because I always say no until like a month ago. I was like, you know what? Some of these guys are struggling. Not that my name has any cachet, but now I've just started saying yes. And then I'm like, oh God, and I go on and people are like dancing and shit. And I'm like, what? I don't understand what the joke is here.
Oh, wow. I don't go on this kind of podcast.
I've had some weird ones. I was like, I think I might be the butt of a joke, but I'm not sure. Go ahead, Chad. Do you have any?
Yeah. I wanted to ask Jay, since you've had your, basically your finger on the pulse of Amazon, I was wondering if what has been since you've been, self-publishing, what has been the most alarming change that you've seen in how Amazon works with authors, and do you see things getting? And this is like a two-parter. So that, and do you see things getting better or worse for indie authors?
AMS ads and worse.
Yeah.
When I first started publishing, there were what was called the also bots. Now I know they still exist, but it's all you had were the also bots, right? So if you networked, if you did some cross promotion, if you did a list swap with another author in your genre, you could really promote your book, and you could really get the algorithm to share your book with other readers of your genre just because of the people who bought it. Mm-hmm. I don't have any sort of hard data on this, but I think it's pretty safe to say that we are now 100% into pay to play mode. Mm-hmm. That unless you are paying Amazon to place your ad, to place your book in the sponsored row of search results, it's not going to be found by anybody. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have an audience that you can send to Amazon, great. That doesn't affect you. 99% of us really need those sort of organic sales. And I'm not trying to be pessimistic or a doomsayer here, but this is the reality of it. If you go on to Amazon now, even if you go to the Kindle section or the book section, you do a search, the first 5, 6, 7, they're all ads.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you search for your if you search for a very specific author, the first search results are not even that author. Yeah. They're the highest bidder of the ad. Mm-hmm. I think that's awful. I think it's absolutely terrible. And I think part of me, even my back catalog that doesn't move a lot, I've really moved away from KDP Select or KU as a lot of authors call it, because I don't want Amazon to have all that juice. It's not fair. And if we're still 2012 or 2013 where you could get organic algorithmic juice going, that'd be different. Mm-hmm. But the whole pay to play model is just disgusting to me. And I know if you have a brick and mortar store, advertising is part of your budget, right? If you're in any other industry, you have to advertise in a certain way. But I feel like Amazon is just draining the blood out of authors, and mm-hmm. and their policies don't reflect the respect for the authors either. I hope you guys aren't trying to get Amazon as a sponsor for your podcast.
No. That'll
okay.
Never happen.
All right, good. Because you look at the return policies on ebooks, right? There's a big kerfluffle about that right now. That's just the fact that you can buy an ebook, you can read the whole thing and then return it completely. Mm-hmm. That's just wrong. That's just wrong on so many levels. And it just shows that Amazon doesn't really have a respect for the authors.
Well, not only that, I think what gets me the most as far as disrespect is, I have a friend who, I've got a lot of friends who are I'm sure we all do. We've got a ton of friends who are yeah, I want to write a book one day, or I'm going to write a book, or what, Well, this one finally did. He wrote a book. He paid for a cover. He picked my brain for all kinds of stuff. I tried to, help hold his hand a little bit through the upload and all that kind of thing. I didn't do editing or any of that kind of stuff for him, but he put it up. Very happy. It was up for 2 or 3 months. Never sold anything. I didn't give it any kind of I don't think any advice on we didn't talk Amazon ads or any of that kind of stuff. But I told him, you're probably not going to sell anything. It's, it's just sitting there with, a gazillion other ones. Then he sends me a message the other day. Amazon shut his account down. And he wanted to know what that was about. And I was like, well, I'm going to tell you right now, you're in for a headache. I said, if I were you, I would not email them. I would call them if you can, get them on the phone. Because the response that you get back from them is just going to be, robotic. Essentially, they're not going to tell you anything. So he did call someone, talked to him for a while, and then they made it clear that everything he had to do from here on out would have to be through email. And he's forwarded me the email, and it essentially said what so many, here is, and it would be, oh gosh, it would crush me to get this email where, you're done. Essentially, you're done here. We're not going to tell you why. And that the fact that they've done that, I have had, I think I've talked about it on the show, but I had some no content books that had original artwork that I had done. But because of the intellectual properties that I used, because I don't understand how that, I know that every shop everywhere are using other people's intellectual properties to sell t-shirts and posters and stickers. And I was doing that with the no content stuff. Some of it was truly original, like my wife's artwork or my artwork, but some of it was, like a dude from Clockwork Orange or something between Twin Peaks. And they finally caught on to that, and I got my account suspended. And they wanted me to do some stuff that I could only do if it wasn't suspended, which would be take them down, unpublish them. Well, I couldn't. So I'd send them emails. And I'd be like, hey, I'd love to cooperate and do this, but I need to be able to get in there to, verify. And they just send the same email back, to me. So I end up having to email somebody else and call. And it's just that kind of thing. They in the last email, they basically said, do don't get hold of us anymore. You're done here. We're not going to tell you why. And he can't figure it out. This was all brand new to him. As far as he knows, he did everything by the book. And I don't know what to tell him either. I gave him some suggestions. Did you do this or this? You know, do you have that book uploaded at a different title that, you know, or something like that? I mean, you wrote the book, right? It's not, you didn't plagiarize anybody. He paid for the cover. So I don't know what to tell him. And that is what bothers me real bad about Amazon, that they can do that. And
you know what, Chad? Like, that's not a rare thing, right?
No.
Like most of us who publish on Amazon, that'll never happen to, but it's happening to some people, and it's real. And like imagine, like, that's very unfortunate, right? But your friend can probably start over, and maybe
it's not a huge deal, right?
But what if you're like, you know, what if you're supporting your family, and what if you're making, you know, 10 grand a month through KDP, and you get one of those emails? You're screwed, right? Yeah. And you have no explanation, you have no recourse. And I get it. Like, it's their playground, and they can close it if they want. But like, you just have to acknowledge that, like, I think you're playing a risky game if you don't diversify your revenue streams. And I mean that both in the micro and in the macro sense. Like in the micro sense, you need to be publishing everywhere. Kobo and Draft to Digital and Apple and Amazon. And in the macro sense, I wouldn't just rely on publishing. Like, you know, if you're writing books, like I know you're doing a lot with covers. Like, you know, you're designing covers for people. Like, the more little streams you have, you're not as vulnerable if one of those go down. And I think we tend to forget that the reason many of us have become full-time creators or entrepreneurs is because we didn't want to rely on a boss or a single source of income because we were too vulnerable. So if you leave that scenario and then you go and you put everything into Amazon KDP, you just traded bosses.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I've twice now, I've tried to go wide, and I don't sell anything. I know that you're supposed to be patient and whatnot, but yeah, I think
when most people go wide, though, they don't advertise at those locations. You know, they just put their books up on Kobo, and they're like, "Why I didn't sell?" It's like, well, yeah, but you gotta find people, but that's the hard part, and that's why a lot of people. I understand why people go. I've been thinking about going back into KDP, and I've been out of it for probably 8 years, just because I don't have time to figure out how to advertise on Apple and Google and Kobo and Barnes and Noble and Amazon. So it's a tough thing. I understand why people constantly are back and forth.
Yeah, I don't blame them. I mean, you start getting that page read money, and you're like, this is nice. You know, like, you essentially, when you publish to Amazon, you're getting a twofer, right? You're getting into their regular store and you're earning royalties, and then you're getting into the KU store and you're earning page reads, and that stuff starts adding up, and it's really hard to turn that money faucet off and be like, okay, now I'm going to take the moral high ground and go wide. Like, I get bills to pay, you know? So I totally get it. Like, it's not easy to navigate. And I think Amazon has set it up that way. Like, they're throwing out those little dime bags of page reads, and they know they get you hooked.
They're good at running their business. That is for damn sure. Chad, anything else before we get out of here?
No, you want to toss? Do you want to toss your two? I mean,
well, I'm going to modify a little bit. You basically just said diversify your income streams. That seems like a really good piece of advice. What have you done that you feel like was just a complete waste of your time and you recommend no one do? Whether it even has to do with your fiction career or any of your 87 other things you're doing at the moment.
Facebook ads.
Okay.
I thought that was a waste of my time.
It's one of those things, though, that's like, some people swear by it, and it's like, well, how? What did you do?
Well, so I'll clarify. I shouldn't have been doing the Facebook ads. Like, I might hire someone who knows what they're doing to do them, but me personally doing them was a total waste of time.
Right.
I haven't done Facebook ads in a couple of years now, but it felt like doing calculus, trying to figure out how to use the platform.
Yeah, it's a casino, man. The house is going to win. You know, like, you're just throwing money down at their table.
All right. Jay, it's been great talking to you. Glad I got to meet you.
Yes.
Likewise, fellas. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging out, buddy.